I rented the lane next to my life, TXT. I rented the lane next to my life. 3 a.m. rules at a 24-hour alley. I didn't plan to bowl, I planned to stop guessing. At 3 in the morning, the alley on Route 19 looks like a childhood arcade that paid its taxes and never went under. The carpet does its loud best, the soda machine hisses like a cornered animal, and the pins keep their private language. Impact, decision, surrender, reset. I came because the message on my phone, team ran late, I may crash at the office. Don't wait up. Wasn't a lie, but it was the kind of truth that leaves doors ajar. I had done enough midnight renovations of our marriage to recognize a draft when it touched my neck. My name is Jonah. I design interfaces for a living. I tell buttons where to stand so people don't trip. For months, my wife, Emily, and I had been living at minimum friction. No grand fights, no slammed doors, just the gentle erosion that comes from sanding off even the helpful edges. We started saying no worries a lot, and I worried about that. The guy at the counter didn't look surprised to see a man rent shoes with his own ennui for company. "Lane 9's clean," he said, and it sounded like mercy. I handed over my size and a card, and he slid across shoes that have known more stories than their disinfectant admits. "League wrapped it too," he added, as if he were telling me the weather. "You'll have space." Lane 9 was 2 down from the cosmic mural where Neptune dunks a spare with celestial confidence. The music was an old playlist that had forgotten to be fashionable and was therefore perfect. I loaded my name into the console, Jon, which somehow looked more honest than Jonah, and pressed start. The pins breathed awake. I bowled the first frame without thinking and picked up 6, then 2, then the last pin sat like a stubborn idea until I coaxed it down. I sat before the second frame and checked my phone. Nothing. I was not, I told myself, waiting for anything except the next ball to return. That's when I saw him at the counter, Dylan. I recognized him from photos in Emily's team chat. Field strategist, good at corralling vendors, the kind of man who looks like he has taught several people to use a ratchet strap in a way that saved their Saturday. He had a sweatshirt with the company logo and a tote bag with gaffer tape poking out. He rented lane 10. He laughed at something the counter guy said, and it wasn't the laugh of a thief. It was the laugh of a person trying to be less tired than he was. He turned and saw me. We both did the math the brave way, out loud. He half lifted the tote like a peace flag. "Jonah, right." "Dylan," I said, standing because it was worse to sit. "Couldn't sleep." "Me neither," he said. He glanced at the empty lanes, at the mural with Neptune, at the way the air in alleys forgives people. "You mind if I take 10? "I mind guessing," I said, and waited. He nodded as if that sentence in any other place would have been obnoxious. Here, it understood its job. He set up on 10 and rolled a gentle 9 that suggested he knew the difference between power and aim. We bowled like that side by side without show until frame 3, when he set the ball on the return and said, not theatrically, "I don't owe you an explanation, but I can offer one." "I don't want a confession," I said. "I want an invitation." The sentence surprised me only in that it had been waiting for the air to be thick enough. His face did something I respected, relief without triumph. "Emily's asleep on the office couch," he said. "Genuine asleep. We cleaned up the demo site, the rain threatened. We didn't want to leave the volunteers alone with tarps, you know the drill. She told me twice to go home. I'm not good at going home to a room full of tools and no voices, so I came here." He looked at lane 10 as if it had feet. "She's your person," he added, and because he didn't owe me that sentence and said it anyway, I believed him. "Okay," I said. "Thank you." The pins waited without fidgeting. I threw a strike that felt less like an athletic success, and more like the body signing a document the mind had already drafted. He sat on the bench between us and wiped his fingers on a towel that had decided, long ago, to be enough. "Can I give you something the night gave me?" he asked. "A rule I use so I don't become the guy I promised myself not to be." "Sure." "No trials after 2, he said. "Not at work, not with people you love. After 2, I only move pallets and say what I can prove." I laughed. It surprised us both. "No trials after 2, I repeated. "That's almost good enough to put on a fridge." "Write it down before you like it too much," he said, and sent his ball down the lane where it turned left with a politics I envied and took the spare. We bowled in peace. The night began to remember it was on a deadline. At frame 6 I checked my phone again, and there it was, 3 dots, then a message. "Asleep here, don't drive, breakfast." It was the kind of text that makes you want to call and the kind that asks you not to. I replied, "Okay, breakfast, I'm bowling. I rented 9 next to my life." The bubble of her reply arrived, paused, disappeared, returned, and decided on one word: good. I wrote another because restraint without heart feels like surrender. "I don't need a confession. I want an invitation." Her reply took exactly the time needed to be honest. "Come see the site at 8. We'll take the tarp off together." Dylan pointed at my phone with 2 bowling finger taps. "Good." "Better," I said. He nodded. We bowled the last frames. I won by 3 pins, and it felt correct that the difference was human error and not destiny. At the counter, as he returned his shoes, Dylan said, "Do you two do rules?" "We do," I said, "sometimes like grown-ups." He tore a score slip from the printer and slid it toward me with a pen that had served more hot dogs than signatures. "Write yours," he said. "Put it next to no trials after 2. You'll forget it otherwise." I wrote as if the ball were heavy and the pins were listening. "If a night lights you up, invite me while you're lacing your shoes. I'll come if I can. If I can't, I won't turn your light into a report." No photogenic secrets. Nothing we'd enjoy telling better without each other in the story. Touch in daylight every day. Even just a wrist, a forehead, a shoulder while the coffee decides what it wants to be. Right of reserve. When the voice wants to climb, step back and read the scoreboard before you rename the game. If either of us starts wanting to be wanted somewhere else, say it while it's small, not after it has luggage. NB, rules are not weapons. He whistled the way you do when a recipe is simple and therefore hard. "Not bad," he said. "Add the wrist thing to the scoreboard now so you don't pretend you lost the stub." He handed me the pen back. "You okay?" "I am not worse," I said. "And I have breakfast at a muddy field where human beings built something worth stepping on." He held out his hand. I shook it. It was the handshake of a man who has carried things and will again. "Tell the big tent I said it held," he said. "It likes compliments." Outside, the night had begun to exhale. I drove home by streets that understand men who don't want to be heroic. I taped the score slip to our fridge under the magnet shaped like a boat we bought during a summer we didn't ruin. I drew a grid on the back. I checked a box for wrist, then slept on my side of the bed like a man who trusts tents and hands in mornings. At 7:45, I pulled into the field where the demo site sat like a patient animal. The tarp looked like an apology. I loved it for that. Emily was there in a sweatshirt that had known other dawns. Her hair had done what hair does when it's decided to be useful. She was holding 2 coffees and the face she wears when she has something unglamorous to do and wants to do it well. "Breakfast," she said. She handed me the cup that said black because she knows I am not brave enough for milk. "Bowling," I said, and handed her the score slip. She read it with the expression she wears for drafts, Focused, kind, ruthless enough to protect time. No trials after two, she said, smiling. That one's not yours. Credit to the man who can lift a pallet in a conversation, I said. She folded the slip as if the paper were worth the effort. Invite me while I'm lacing my shoes, she read aloud and looked up. You coming to the site when I say come counts. It does, I said, but it has to be the kind of come that wants a witness, not a witness stand. I can learn that, she said. I want to. We walked to the tarp and began, from opposite corners, to roll it back. It's the most ordinary kind of intimacy, moving the same heavy thing in agreement. A volunteer named Casey waved, and we waved back. Dylan arrived with a donut box and the expression of a man pretending he hadn't slept on moss. He set the box on a spool that had become a table and said to Emily, "Your husband beat me by 3 pins. It's important you know that the universe still supports underdogs." "It always has," she said. She looked at me, and the look included an apology so small it didn't need to be spoken. "Do we make a rule about donuts?" "Only eat them before the rules become weapons," I said. "After that, they're just comfort." "Good," she said, and bit into one with a competence I adore. We worked. The morning stretched and decided to forgive us. We did not talk about the shape of last night as if it were a villain. We talked about today as if it could be carried. When the field was ready for feet, Emily walked over to our car and taped the score slip to the dashboard where we could pretend it was not sentimental. She touched my wrist to ask for the car keys, and I said daylight because I am a child when it comes to nomming my gratitude. At 10, when the first wave of visitors arrived and Dylan slipped into the quiet job of making other people comfortable, Emily leaned close and said, "Let's admit something." "Okay," I said, braced for a sentence too large for morning. "We got polite," she said. "I want to get exact." "Exact is a revolution," I said, aiming for humor but landing in fact. She nodded. "Then let's be the kind of couple that knows the difference between an invitation and a confession and chooses the first. "Deal," I said, "and after 2, no trials." "And donuts before rules become weapons," she added. "And a wrist every day," I said. "And when I'm lacing my shoes," she said, "I'll text you come, and I'll mean stand next to me while I do the thing I chose, not rescue me from consequences." "Good," I said. "I am terrible at rescue. I'm decent at witness." "Witness is my favorite role you play," she said, "right after human being." We laughed, and it sounded like work boots on plywood, plain, necessary, heading the right direction. That night I checked the grid and drew another box solid, invite while lacing. The day after that, I missed a box and told the truth about why. On Thursday, I opened my laptop at 9 and closed it at 10 because the rule about daylight touch doesn't enforce itself. On Friday, we argued at 3 in the afternoon like citizens. At 4, we stood in the same kitchen with a donut and split it like a treaty. Every now and then, when neither of us can sleep, I drive to lane 9 and rent shoes that have listened to worse. The counter guy asks if I want cosmic, and I say no because I have enough stars at home in the silverware drawer. Dylan shows up once in a while and beats me by 1, and it feels appropriate. The pins keep their promise. Impact, decision, surrender, reset. If you came for scandal, I owe you a soda and a better story. Here is what I have instead. A score slip with 6 lines, a field that forgave weather, a man who knew when to take a step back, and 2 people who decided that the opposite of a secret isn't a confession. It's an invitation. The rest is maintenance. No trials after 2, donuts before weapons, hands steady on the tarp, and a wrist every day in the daylight, the moment a life decides to stay where it is wanted.